Alright, today we're going to try a new way of videotaping. I'm hoping it works because it's a heck of a lot easier for me to get it done this way. We'll find out how it looks later. But anyway, today we're going to talk about Chapter 12, Peers Play, and Popularity. well, so it's a different chapter, a little bit not quite up to the less rigor to it. So anyway, let me see how this works. Here we go. All right, peers by definition are those who are about the same age, and as you know, kids are the same age. Friends are, mutually, what can I say? Okay, this is an odd setup for me too. A voluntary mutual relationship that involves some degree of affection between peers. Friendships need to be two-sided, need to be reciprocal. They persist over time. They often serve companionship roles. We'll talk about the different roles and different functions of friendship as children age. Okay, they progress from amusement to intimacy. That's a nice way to lay it out. All right. Oops. See, that's what I'm used to doing. Okay, next one. We find the earliest social interactions with infants when they display mutual gaze. By 6 months old already, infants begin to babble, smile, touch each other, begin to interact with each other. I still remember a very neat time when my kid was, maybe 6 or 8 months old, and we took him down to Houston. We had some friends. I was there at a job interview, and some friends down there. They had a baby just about exactly the same age, and we put him on the floor. And our kids, it was an amazing thing how socially interactive they were, and they were both about 8 months old. None of us expected that the kids would do that. But of course, there's a lot of individual variability among infants in social responsiveness, clearly temperament. Some children are outgoing, some children are more introverted, some are more extroverted, etc. All right. The complexity of play becomes more complex as kids learn how to talk, as they are able to coordinate their muscles, as they're able to have fine motor skills, things like this. Kids begin to imitate other kids more often. They begin to notice that they themselves are being imitated. You start to see friends in that age by around age 2. In the earliest time, so the playmate by convenience is how it works. And I mean, as a parent, this is the thing. We want it's a lot of work to get your kids bundled up and stuff. So what you want to do is you want to find a family with kids that are about your age, and you hope that the kids are going to be friends with each other, and these are your friends, and everything works out. And that works all fine for a while, but as we're going to see at some point, kids become picky about who is and is not a friend, and they'll no longer just conveniently grab whoever's present. Okay? When there are conflicts, 80 about toys. What a shock, huh? Good friends spend a lot of time. They have common activities during this time. This is the preschool years. When the kids go to school, the amount of social contact goes up immensely, in particular like on the playground and things like that. Children start to get best friends, but I'm not exactly sure what best friend means at this point in their life. The number of best friends that a child has increases dramatically by the time they're about age 11. Friendships follow a progression. Clearly, good friends spend a lot of time play-based friends. Later on, loyal and faithful friends, right? Loyalty and generosity. Here's a good quote for an 8 to 11-year-old friendship. She sticks by me when other kids tease me. I mean, that would be a pretty good friend, right? Even at any age, actually. Later on, as we know from the social development with Erik Erikson, it's the intimacy thing. As the children progress and get a little older, it's intimacy that is important. All right. throughout the world, all over the world, there's a segregation of genders that they tend to segregate into groups all over, even as early as 2 to 3 years of age. Children begin to become aware of gender and what gender means. Very interesting. By 6 years old, segregation is very firm. If you watch 6-year-olds on the playground, you see one mixed sex group for every 11 same-sex groups. And so here's an interesting picture of that. And we see the girls tend to play with girls, the boys tend to play with boys. Very rarely do you find girls playing with a group of boys or a boy playing with a group of girls. So it does, of course, happen. Why does it happen? That's an interesting question. The old Freudian thing, during the latent stage of psychosexual development, according to Freud, Freud's full of you-know-what at this point, right? That children are trying to avoid feelings of guilt associated with their feelings of sexuality. Could be some other things though. Play compatibility makes a lot more sense. Children want to play with kids that do similar things to themselves. But at the same time, children begin to get an exaggerated belief about what, a boy thinks, well, a boy must do these activities, and these are activities that other boys are doing, therefore I must be with these other boys or something. Yeah, it makes sense. And of course, what happens is there's a culture of boys and a culture of girls, okay? And therefore, expectations and etc. are put on the boys and the girls. Boys, as a general rule, in their boy culture, tend to play in larger groups in more active games that are more aggressive. Girls tend to have smaller groups with closer ties, less physical aggression, perhaps more relational aggression, as we saw. Girls learn to share thoughts and feelings, be intimate, and things of this nature, whereas boys, in the culture of the boy, they're taught that intimacy is, in fact, a sign of weakness. So what can adults do to reduce the negative effects of childhood gender segregation? I'm not sure that it is a bad thing necessarily to teach your son to be a man. I don't know. That's a rule that I take very important, in fact, that I can't imagine taking my daughter out and teaching her to use the trimmer, but that's clearly something I'm going to work on with my son. I don't know. I don't know if that's necessarily bad, because there are still gender roles that are around. I don't know. Okay. Parents can model egalitarian roles. Hey, I do some of that, all right? I do quite a bit of the traditionally female jobs, all right? I'm the one that picks the kids up at school. Granted, there are a few other males there, but by far the majority of the people at that school picking up kids are, in fact, mothers. Teachers can perhaps avoid creating differences and segregating children by gender unless necessary. Adolescents spend twice as much time with their friends, even outside of the classroom, twice as much time with their friends as they do with their parents and other adults. Now, that's a crazy number. Those that have good friendships tend to have higher self-esteem. They tend to be more popular among their peers, etc. They also tend to have better grades. Adolescents who don't have close friends, isolated, lonely, because intimacy, as we know from Erikson's stages of social development, is in fact the intimacy that is the most important part of social development in adolescence. And if kids aren't getting that out of a friendship, then there's not much point. Okay? Oh yeah, cliques and crowds. No, I've always hated those. Cliques, right? Small groups, 3 to 9 kids. They spend time together, a lot of time together. Usually by about age 11, almost all kids are in some kind of a clique. Most are very closed, and they just don't want to get anybody, don't allow new members in. As the kids get a little bit older, cliques kind of emerge into crowds, although you can have cliques and crowds, cliques within a crowd. Crowd is usually larger, and it's a group of people that have something in common. And every kid has to be part of a crowd, otherwise you're a complete outsider. I can still remember the day I started high school. I was in 10th grade, right? We had a strange high school where 10th grade high school was only 10 through 12, and I was 14 years old going into 10th grade, and I was the youngest kid in the class, and I was kind of small for my age to begin with. And so I got in there, and I was in with the kids as old as 19 years old, some of them, and you have to find a way to fit in. And so you had to find a crowd. And so I started to smoke, and smoking was my way of joining this crowd. It gave me something a group to hang out with somehow. But clearly we find, membership, of course, the jocks, the druggies, and nerds, these different crowds. Isn't it amazing I wasn't in the nerd crowd? It amazes me to this day. Minorities are often placed into their own crowds, whether they like it or not. That is to say, the other people classify them that way. Crowds do impact behavior. This is Social Psych 101. But of course, here's a good question. Do troublemakers join the bad crowd, or do kids join the bad crowd and become troublemakers? I don't know. I mean, it's something going on there, though. We've seen this before. Having antisocial or delinquent peers is one of the strongest risk factors for adolescent violence. We've seen this before. Aggressive adolescents who are rejected. Yeah. Peer pressure tend to be positive for most. Okay, good. Self-esteem is related to which groups you're in. Okay, and those things go away at some point. By mid-adolescence, you start to get you start to lose a gender segregation, and you start to see the emergence of romantic relationships. Yeah, we see that. I already said that. Affiliations. I like that. That's a cute word. I didn't know how to describe my son's girlfriends. He's, oh, I have a girlfriend. Really? What does it mean when you say I have a girlfriend? And I think that his definition at this point, he's recently turned 13, and at this point, I think that an affiliation is really a good way to describe, what a 12 to a 13-year-old's girlfriend is all about. Okay, friendly relationships with members of the opposite sex, something like that. Eventually, they move into romantic relationships. By age 12, about 25% of these adolescents report having been in a romantic relationship, though their definition of a romantic relationship, I think, would usually probably qualify as an affiliation rather than. The average length of these relationships is 4 months. Okay, by about age 18, about 75% of teenagers have been in relationships, and they last about a year. Problem, though, is teens who form romantic relationships early often have more problems. But this is probably related to the findings we had for physical development. When children develop physically early, they develop early, they tend to have problems because people treat them differently. And I'd be willing to bet it is these early developers, or the ones that hit puberty early, are the ones that are more likely to have the earliest romantic relationships in adolescence. So there's something there. Or it could be that the kids were already having trouble in the first place with relationships, and so they're going towards one-on-one relationships to try to get the intimacy they're not getting from their other things. Okay? However, these dating relationships also are the primary cause of teen depression, because inevitably, almost every teen relationship is going to end. Alright, now play. Play is interesting. Play is an important thing. A pleasurable activity actively engaged in on a voluntary basis, motivated intrinsically, right? You do it because you enjoy it, and containing some element that is non-literal. Alright, that makes sense. Play is a big deal. It allows the earliest kids to develop muscle coordination, social interaction skills, logical thinking, problem-solving skills, all kinds of things. Okay, how the world, imagine the world as it could be, something of this nature. So it allows them to explore occupations, perhaps explore skills and talents and things of this nature. Mildred Parton made extensive observations of young children, and she looked at types of play that they exhibited, and it was really kind of an interesting way that she described this. When children are very young, they tend not to have social skills. They tend to play alone. They usually don't coordinate their play with other kids. As they get older, they gain more social skills and more physical coordination. They tend to integrate their play. They tend to sort of work towards group goals or something a little bit more. When children do not, yeah, rejection. Okay. Um, so here's her six types of play. The first is not even really play per se. It's just unoccupied behavior. Kid just sitting, doesn't really doing anything. Onlooking kids are watching other kids play. They might talk to the other kids, but they don't actually involve in the play. In solitary play, a kid is actually playing, but playing by themselves with their play completely unrelated to any other person's play. In parallel play, we find this is always interesting. This is when kids sit down together and play Legos. So they're using the same Legos, and once in a while they may well show an interest in what the other kid is doing, but there's no active attempt to coordinate what they're doing. In associative play, the kids play together, but the coordination is not great. They talk and stuff. Okay, I guess maybe I described associative play a moment ago. And then cooperative play, clearly the kids are playing together, trying to get accomplish a larger group goal. All right, here's some good quotes. Play, this comes directly out of your textbook. Play is more than just a social enterprise. It's through play that children learn a lot about the world and about themselves. They learn to follow the rules of formal games. They can develop and apply their skills in logic. They have the opportunities to be creative, solve problems, explore the world, play with language, whatever. Okay, all kinds of interesting things with play. I'll tell you, as a father, I make sure my children do certain things. They have certain chores, whether they be cleaning the house type chores or assignments, homework that they need to get done. But when my kids go to play, sometimes I approve of their play, and sometimes I think that they're just wasting their time. And when I see my daughter dump out a bucket of, I don't know, I think they came from Grandma's house, a bucket of old dollhouse furniture, things like this, and she sits and organizes and sorts them up, and that to me is good play. I respect that. That's play, which is making that girl smarter. When my son's definition of play, however, is to jump on the internet and get into one of his video games. So clearly I approve of some types of play, and I think it's play which is making a kid in some way or another improve themselves in some type of play I'm not. Play in infancy, clearly the sensorimotor play is during the sensorimotor stage of cognitive development. Everything about the world comes through your senses, if you recall. There is no such thing as representations. Remember we had talked about a toy to an infant is like the big plastic keys that you can stick in your mouth and chew on. And the only reason they're shaped like keys is because it amuses the adults. That the infants couldn't care less what they're shoving in their mouth. They just need something to chew on. That's what play means to them. Early plays, in fact, the earliest play doesn't even involve outside objects, but in fact, playing with their own hands and figuring out how their fingers work and things like that. Symbolic play begins to emerge around 12 months, although I think that's a little early. By around 3 years of age, you start to get sociodramatic play, where you start to get role-playing, imitation of adults, reenacting, or relationships, right? Or perhaps expressing needs, or an outlet for forbidden impulses if you were Freudian, which I'm not. A way to just, look at different things that could be. Around age 7, the kids go into the concrete operational stage, and we find that play involves more coordination and organization, more realistic. And I'm thinking this is where doctor comes in. Want to play doctor? I mean, who didn't play doctor, right? That's what's wrong, man. But during this stage, you start to get kids start to get obsessed with rules and the rules and logic. In fact, my daughter made up a game recently. It was kind of crazy. She called it the game of life, and it involved this great big bucket of stuff. And she gave each person a plastic Easter egg filled with poker chips, and the poker chips represented money, and each player took a turn, and you were supposed to, in your turn, purchase objects such as a car and a person, and then using your money, you would, she had a whole set of rules, man. If she just wrote these down, it was crazy. You could buy a cow, and each turn, then you could get paid back. It would cost you like 50 to buy the cow, and then on each turn, you could sell the milk for 1 back, and if you were desperate for money, you could sell the cow for meat and get 40 back. But if you sold the cow for meat, then you couldn't use it to get milk anymore, which makes a lot of sense. And she had this whole set of rules, and every turn, if you wanted to drive your car, you had to spend one coin on gas to fill the car. And I mean, it was a really quite involved game, and I think that the rules just sort of showed up every time on every play. She made one up, so it was interesting. But also children's collections, they're just crazy. They want to collect everything. My son's room at this age was just filled with just leaf collections and stick collections and rock collections and pennies and whatever it was. It was just everything, everything in that room. In adolescence, play becomes more realistic, and they move their playtime, whatever that means, to, and now we call it perhaps leisure time rather than playtime, to video games and movies and musics and things like that. Okay. Oh, here, leisure time in adolescence. I don't know. This is an interesting picture. It's saying that kids spend 18 hours a week with audio media. I think really what this means is they spend 18 hours a week where there's music playing or something. Because, I don't know, that's a pretty big number. But it's interesting. Sensory, there's your whole, the one. Cultural differences in play, that's interesting. We find that the values and attitudes of a culture can be transmitted through play. Blah, 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 blah. Oh, this is interesting. I like this. The popular and unpopular children. This is a big deal. Some kids are more popular than others, and it's an interesting thing to figure out what is it that makes one kid popular. And there's some factors that are obvious, but not all. So what they use to study this idea of popularity in children is something called the peer nomination technique. And it's very simple. You give each child in the classroom 2 slips of paper, and you say, I want you to write on one slip of paper the person in the class you like the most, and on the other slip of paper, I want you to write the person in the class you like the least, all right? So it's pretty straightforward. And by looking at this, they create 5 different categories of popularity. And they're really quite interesting. And creates 5 categories. There's the popular children, those that receive a lot. As we move up at the top of this image, we see that they have many nominations. And if the nominations that they get are like the most, then they tend to be called popular children. If the children have a lot of people, put their name on, but what they write is "I like this kid the least," then those are called rejected children. Some children are controversial, and those are the ones, a small group, but those are the ones that receive quite a few nominations of both "I like this kid" and quite a few that "I don't like this kid." All right. An average kid gets a couple of each, and neglected kids tend to get no nominations, whether they be positive or negative, just don't get any. Okay? And there's some developmental outcomes associated with being in these different groups. Okay? There's a truth to these popularness. Popular children, we said this, rejected. Okay? And controversial. Okay? And average and neglected. Okay. Certain personality characteristics. I already said that. It's correlational, right? But kids that are put into the popular group then have more outcomes that are etc., etc. It's also been used to study racial discrimination. It turns out, in particular, in classes with small numbers of minority children, the least popular tends to be those members of that minority group. Not always, but tends to be. Oh, yeah, and look, children are also, when you say like the most, by far the majority of children, when they respond to like the most, they nominate a member of their own racial group. I don't remember this one at all. This one I do know. Peer rejection is a big deal. Literally, rejection, by the way, this is a little side note for us, a biology side note. I love biology. They can do brain scans of a child receiving physical pain, and they can do a brain scan of a child being rejected. And it turns out that rejection in the brain looks exactly the same, well, very similar anyway, very, very similar to physical pain. So the act of rejection is the act of physical pain. All right, it's kind of a funky thing. Peer rejection is related to delinquency, arrest, violence. Clearly, those kids at Columbine, Dylan Klebold and whatever, I think it was Harris, whatever, they were rejected. They clearly were rejected. They created their own little clique, a group of just a few of them, and they found something, but they were clearly rejected. So it's possible perhaps to intervene, but once a kid has been rejected, it's very hard for that kid, even, take the kid to a new school and let him start over? No, because it's the same kid, and there was reasons that he was rejected by his peers in the first place. So this is a tricky thing to take care of. Well, that's all I got on this chapter. I know that I kind of buzzed through it, but this is a particular chapter that I think has got less meat to it than other chapters. So we'll just cut there. We don't have to beat a dead horse, right? We'll be done, and we'll talk to you on the next chapter.